Before we start the show, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Their support keeps this show free for you.
Taxes was taxing. Now taxes is relaxing when you file for free.
I can file for free? TurboTax Free Edition. Roughly 37% of filers qualify. Simple Form 1040 returns only. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free. I can file for free.
Now this is taxes. File for free with TurboTax Free Edition and get your maximum refund. No schedules except for earned income tax credit, child tax credit, and student loan interest. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free.
Thanks for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm Michelle, and I wanted to read a review from somebody on Apple who says, grateful to have found this podcast. I just started listening last week and I have started implementing the advice with my 3 kids. I started seeing changes the first day. I'm focusing on connection. My husband and I are working on changing our old way of doing things so that we can have peace and harmony with our kids. This podcast and the Facebook group and emails and notes have been so helpful. Looking forward to continue learning and implementing what we learn. Amazing. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad all of you are here. Thank you for listening to the podcast and leaving these incredible reviews. I would love to hear from more of you, but thank you. All right, let's talk about system restraint collapse. Some people have heard of it, maybe. Some people haven't. Really, all it is when our kids hold themselves together really tightly, when they are kind of regulating in an environment where maybe we aren't around or where their safe people aren't around, and they have to really regulate and manage relationships like school or in a certain social event, anywhere where they are really kind of holding it together and are unable to fully express themselves like they do with us because we are the safe people, which isn't always easy being the safe person. I have to say, like, it isn't easy being the person that they are able to let down their guard with, and they're able to, take out their feelings basically on us. But in the long run, I suppose it's better for them. And it brings us closer if we can manage the way in which they offload those feelings, because that's the really hard part, is staying regulated in those moments. It's really hard to have a dysregulated child and hold space for them. But back to system restraint collapse. So we see a lot of system restraint collapse after school. That's the big one, where kids will come home and they'll just unload on you. You can do nothing right. They don't want any of the snacks that you've given them because all of them are wrong, and they will snap at you for no reason. And they're having a hard time. We see it a lot in kindergarten, where it's the first time where they have to, be at the big school and really regulate and manage all kinds of relationships, lots of different kids and lots of different adults and lots of transitions and learning and activities. And it's overwhelming for kids' nervous systems. And so when they come home, they often, depending on the temperament of the kid, will really offload their feelings. And so when they do that, I recommend coming to a child with as much calm and regulation as you possibly can. Now, if you know you have this child who's coming with system restraint collapse and you've experienced it, I would get really resourced if you can, which isn't always possible. But if you can, get really resourced before they come home, or really ground yourself and know that, it's coming. Right? Tell yourself it's coming. Have that expectation that's coming, because when we have that expectation that's coming, it somehow makes it easier. So I would really recommend that you find something maybe to read, or you find a moment just to be quiet and alone, or any tiny thing that you can do before you meet a kid with system restraint collapse. Now, let me tell you a story about a child of mine who had system restraint collapse recently. So we think of system restraint collapse as like kindergartners and, maybe middle schoolers or our freshmen in high school. But let me tell you, our freshmen in college seems also have system restraint collapse. And this mama was not ready for that because she didn't realize, ding, 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 I should have, right? I work in parenting. I see it all the time. But I was like, oh, college kids don't have that, right? They're done with that. That's over. And Esme hadn't had, a lot of system restraint collapse, although she had some in high school, but it wasn't big. And so this sweet girl came home for Christmas break, and the wheels came off. The kid was totally dysregulated, and I was not prepared, and I did not handle it well at first. And I was like, no. And by the way, I was like, no, I actually don't want to deal with your system restraint collapse. I don't have the bandwidth to do this. I thought you were like a grown kid with, a regulated system. No, I was wrong. And so I didn't respond to her in the way I wanted to the first, few minutes that it was happening. I was like, wait, what are you doing? Why are you okay? Like, what's happening? Why are you doing this? And I totally questioned her and I think shamed her. And then I re-regulated and I was like, hold on, wait, this kid's having a hard time because she was in college with a roommate for 3 months, going to university classes, walking to and from school, 20, 25 minutes each way in the freezing cold. She's not used to that. She's, from LA and she's in a cold climate and navigating all these new friendships and all these new relationships, figuring out how to, take care of herself. How can she get her laundry done and change her bed sheets and, make sure she gets to the dining hall before it closes and manage her money. And like, it was very hard for her, I think. And she did quite well. And I think that's the thing too. I posted about this and people were like, well, she's not able to cope. And having system restraint collapse with the people that you love the most doesn't mean you can't cope. It likely means that you're coping, but that coping is taking a lot of energy out of your psyche. And that when you have an opportunity to offload, you're going to. And so she did. And she needed to. And she needed me. And she needed her mom. And I forgot that is something that she needed. I forgot that I'm still a huge presence in her life. And I forgot that, she's not an adult yet. She is, right? She's 19, but she's not, her brain isn't fully developed and her regulation skills aren't fully there. And maybe we always will have this soft spot with our most trusted people. And isn't that what we want? I mean, I'm not really close with my mom, but I would have loved to have been, and I would have loved to have been able to come to her when hard things happened and to have that, safe place. My friends became that place. I have really good friends who I can go to all the time, and they've become my, support system. But I think we all need emotional support when we go through big transitions or when we're having a hard time or when life throws us a curveball. And I'd say, being in college is likely a huge transition in one's life. And to expect that a child goes to college without this upheaval or without these bumps, I think is unrealistic. And I was really unrealistic around it. I thought, oh, she's at school and she's not like calling me like everything's horrible. It must be great. And I think for the most part, it is really great. But at the same time, she needed her mom. So here's what I did. And here's what I recommend doing for kids who have system restraint collapse or any kid who's having an emotional turmoil or having a hard time. We're hitting pause for a moment to thank our sponsors. These brands make sure you can listen to this podcast for free. Are you sick of the sibling fighting? Are you tired of asking your child to do the same thing over and over and over again, only to end up using threats and bribes to try to get them to cooperate? Well, it doesn't have to be like that. You can learn the ideas of connection through our Connected Parent Mastermind group coaching program. We meet 3 days a week. Myself and my 2 coaches hold meetings. We also give you access to all of my online materials, meaning 10 modules of instruction, PDFs, podcasts, and my book. You get to join our school community and interact with coaches and myself and so many parents who are doing this work just alongside you. So if you're feeling stuck or if you want to accelerate your connected parenting practice even further, join the Connected Parent Mastermind. Click the link in the show notes for more information. Hey there, Peace and Parenting family. If you love the podcast but wish to enjoy it without interruptions, your wish has come true. Introducing the ad-free version of the Peace and Parenting podcast, available exclusively on Apple Podcast. As a subscriber, you'll get all the heartfelt advice, parenting stories, and actionable tips you love without any ads. For less than the cost of a coffee each month, you will enjoy uninterrupted listening while also supporting our work to help you build stronger connections with your kids. Try it out for free. Simply find Peace and Parenting on Apple Podcasts, click Try Free, and you'll gain immediate access to our ad-free episodes. There's no commitment and you can cancel anytime. So if you're ready for a more peaceful, uninterrupted listening experience, subscribe now. Let's keep focusing on connection without the distractions. Let's dive back in. The number one thing is to stay regulated ourselves. That's the hardest thing that we can ever do, because likely when we were kids, nobody stayed regulated. So we don't have a good model of what that looks like. We don't have a memory of that. And so we don't really understand what it's like to have a supportive person in our world. But a supportive person doesn't, many people talk about this. They don't add to the chaos. They add to the calm. And so if we can be as calm as possible, that helps our child, first of all, know that their feelings are okay and they're not going to rattle us, and they're not going to derail us from loving them or understanding them or being there for them. So if we can stay calm and regulated and in their presence, this is one of the most important, ideas. I hear a lot that kids will say, go away, get out of here, don't talk to me. And I don't know if they necessarily believe that. And I think really coming to them with deeper understanding and calm will help them ride through that emotional wave. I say if a kid is telling you, I need my space when they're calm, that makes a lot of sense. But if they're saying they need their space, their space when they're really upset, I don't think they mean that. And I would ask them later, hey, when you asked me to leave, did you really want me to leave or did you want me to stay? Because I hear 9 times out of 10, the kids really want us to stay. If they want us to leave, that would a little bit worry me, only because then are they wanting us to leave because our loving presence gets those feelings to come out and they're scared of their feelings, so they want us to go so they can stuff their feelings? You can kind of test that out by if you leave and your child calms down and then they come to you, but then later on that day or the next day, they're still kind of like revved up and unable to settle and everything's wrong and sibling fights and they're really displaying some off-track behaviors. It's likely that whatever was in there is still stuck in there and didn't get out. That's what I worry about, is that it gets stuffed because we walk away. So stay calm and present with our kids. We don't need to talk. We really don't need to talk a lot. And I think this is where all of us get derailed, is because we want to talk. And a lot of us want to ask, well, what's wrong? Well, tell me what's going on. Well, tell me your feelings. Or, well, I can see you're really mad. And we want to categorize the feelings, or we want to talk about the feelings, or we want to have a discussion. Not the time. Not the time to name feelings, not the time to talk about feelings, not the time to really say anything. This is the child's show, right? This is their show. They're going to display what they need to us. They are going to act in the ways that make sense to them. And it really isn't for us to curate or to narrate or to, get into a huge discussion around. So I like to be as quiet as I possibly can, but be present. So when I say quiet, some people say, well, they just ignore. That's not what I mean when I say quiet. Quiet and present. Eye contact at their level, near them, showing them that you care and being there for them no matter what. Some kids get violent, some kids kick, some kids hit, some kids push. And so keeping yourself safe and keeping them safe is really important. I don't really recommend saying, I can't let you hit, I can't let you kick, only because they've already hit or they've already kicked, and it isn't probably going to change anything. And does it create shame in that moment? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but I'd err on the side of maybe it does, in order to keep as much shame away from it as possible, because they don't mean to be kicking or hitting. And that aggression isn't, it isn't intentional. They're in a fear response. So keeping yourself safe and not really mentioning the aggression, and really staying quiet and present. That way they believe that you're not judging them, that you are not judging their behavior, and that they don't feel, hopefully in those moments, that you don't love them. Not that you don't love them, but perhaps some of the things that we do and say could lead a child to believe that during these moments, if we're correcting them or if we're reprimanding them, or there can be things where the child might believe like we don't love them as much as we do when they're calm. So we want to make sure that they feel unconditionally loved without talking too much, without having to say that. I wouldn't use play. Some people interpret my use of play as to use play in these tumultuous moments. Using play in these hard moments, system restraint collapse, or any time a kid is having a hard time, using play is not advisable. It is not the time to use play. Play is used when a kid is whining, or when a kid is, asking over and over and over and over again, those kind of behaviors, not when a kid is in a full blown meltdown, system restraint collapse, or some sort of tantrum. We don't want to use play. It will only make things worse. It might make a kid angry, and there's no need for it. And it doesn't really work anyways. We have to go straight to empathy. But when I say empathy, I don't mean talking. I mean being present. Now, there are a few things you can say, but I'm warning you, don't say too many because I don't think that it's helpful. I'm right here. I understand. I hear you. Really, honestly, I don't think you even need more than that. And some kids will say, well, you don't understand. You can't hear me. And you don't have to respond to all of that. You can stay quiet and present. And you don't have to get into a back and forth with a child who is dysregulated, because they're going to say all kinds of cuckoo things because they're not thinking well. But we don't have to get into some sort of discussion about what they're saying. None of it really matters. So in this moment where Esme was having these hard feelings, difficult feelings, I didn't remember any of this. And I was so shocked, and I was not saying the right things, and I was not doing the right things. And it only made things worse. But when I could course correct and get present with her and realize that she is having a hard time, things got better. And she was able to calm down, within a reasonable amount of time without also me getting upset. Because if we start to get in a tete-a-tete with the child or start to name their feelings, and it creates more anger and upset for them, and then upset for us. Now we're in like kind of a fight as opposed to just leaving the upset with them. One other thing that I think is really important to remember is that these things can take time. It might take 20, 30, 40 minutes or more. It depends on the child. It depends on the situation. But I've sat through tantrums that have lasted well over an hour when the kids were little. Even the system restraint collapse thing with Esme at 19, I think lasted like 30, 40 minutes. And there's no telling when or where or why or how, but these things happen, but they can get through it. And the calmer we are and the more present we can be, the quicker I think they get through it, and they get through it without shame or upset, because the last thing we want to do is make them feel bad about the feelings that they're having. And so really staying calm and present helps them really believe in the idea of unconditional love, that we love them at their worst moments just as much as we love them at their best moments. One other thing too that I think is important to remember is that a kid at the end of these episodes, they'll likely give you eye contact if they're ready to come out of it. And usually we see afterwards that they do so much better. Just in general, they're sunnier and happier and do better. And that was the case with Esme. Like, she did better the rest of the break because she got it all out. And it was, it wasn't easy, but we got through it. What I don't recommend is going back and revisiting. So some people like to revisit what they said or what happened or how this whole tantrum or upset came about. And they want to talk about, well, hey, you in that upset, you said I was dumb, and, you called me stupid. And I want to really talk about that's not how we talk to people. Well, I think any child over 2 likely knows that they're not supposed to say stupid or dumb, and they probably don't mean it at all. And so revisiting it only creates more shame. And they already have so much internal shame around this episode that I don't know if they need that extra amount of shame from us as we revisit this issue. So I really wouldn't revisit it. And I think they probably know. And I think the less that we revisit it and the more we hold space and the more they believe that we love them unconditionally, the more they're able to self-reflect and either come back or just self-reflect on their own. And it's okay if they don't come back with any sort of, apology or amends, because it doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it internally. So system restraint collapse is everywhere, even with our college kids. I would say probably I would wonder if it's with people who are newly, married. I would wonder if it's with people who are in new jobs. I would wonder if it's with people who are in new living environments. I'm sure it exists in the adult world too. We just don't notice it as much. There's not a name for it. But I really have to say that, I'm grateful that I can be that space for my child. It isn't easy being that space for my child, but it brings us so much closer. It creates so much more connection for us. And so when these things happen and I can be in this storm with Ez, it makes her feel more connected to me and it makes me feel more connected to her. Now, this whole situation could go totally the other way if you're unable to be present, or if you're questioning, or if you're acting the way in which I did at the beginning of this situation with her. It can be very divisive. It can be disconnecting. And so I think that's what the beauty of connected parenting is these hard moments create connection. It isn't just about special time, right? It's about the hard moments being connective and all of these tools being connection tools. And so this idea of empathy and understanding and coming to our kids in these moments really becomes a huge connection piece. All right. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for joining me on the Peace in Parenting podcast. And I can't wait to see you next time.